While walking down the street of Verona, Benvolio suggests to Mercurio that perhaps they should walk indoors so that they may avoid any possible fight that may erupt should they see any of the people from the Capulet family, but Mercutio isn't interested in that precaution. In the middle of one of his usually long speeches, Tybalt, Petruchio, and other Capulet men actually appear into the scene. Tybalt and Mercutio quickly escalate into a war fight, and despite Benvolio cautioning Mercutio that they are out in the public and should not be seen fighting with each other, Mercutio isn't interested in being worried about the side events. Eventually, Romeo enters the scene. Romeo, the love I ever can afford, not better term than this. Thou art a villain. Tybalt, the reason that I have to love the dead dot much skews the appertaining rage to such a greedy villain am I known. Therefore, farewell, I see you knows me, not boy. You should not excuse the injuries that thou hast done me. Therefore, do not endraw. Although Romeo tries to calmly make peace, Mercutio and belittles Romeo for being passive and say that it is dishonorable. In fact, Mercutio takes it a step further and tells Tybalt that he is ready to fight Tybalt right now. Romeo tries to break up the fight, but the process doing so, Tybalt lands a stab into Mercutio right under Romeo's arm. Heavily wounded from the stabbing, Mercutio curses both houses, both both houses, and eventually he passes away. Since Mercutio was one of Romeo's best friends, his death makes Romeo furious. He tried to be a good cousin of Tybalt, but just within an hour of becoming Tybalt's cousin, the man has already killed Mercutio. Romeo thinks to himself that Juliet's beauty has made him weak. Oh, Julie, thy beauty hath made me effeminate, and my temper softened. Ballards still saw Romeo and Tybalt without any inhibition start to fight each other right in the middle of the street where everyone is there to witness it. The fight ends with Romeo landing the killing blow onto Tybalt. Shocked by the fact that he has actually killed Tybalt, Romeo just stands there not knowing what to do until his friend Benvolio tells him to run away quickly, since the prince will find out from the accounts of at least some of the citizens that were watching, and Romeo will be put dead. So Romeo runs off, and then the prince enters with the Montagues and the Capulets. Benvolio explains everything that happened to the prince, but the prince is not merciful to Romeo at all. He says that Mercutio was related to him by blood, and he should not have died because he fell between the Capulets and the Montagues. He exiles Romeo and says that Romeo should be killed if he is found within the city.
Juliet waits all alone for Romeo. She daydreams about her love, and everything is just fine, until the nurse walks into the room. The nurse, after floundering around with her words, finally tells Juliet that Romeo has killed Tybalt. Juliet responds first by wondering how such a sweet man could have done such a bad thing. And then the nurse curses Romeo. She scolds for her speaking badly about her love. The scene ends with the nurse telling Juliet to stay in her room. Apparently, the nurse knows that Romeo is hiding away, afraid of hiding cells at the moment. She will travel to see Romeo and make certain that Romeo can still come to see Juliet for their wedding night. The night before, the nurse leaves Juliet, gives the nurse for her own ring so that the nurse may deliver it to see Romeo as a sign of her love.
Friar Lawrence tells Romeo that the punishment for Romeo seems to be only banishment and not outright death. But when Romeo hears this, he thinks to himself, the banishment without Juliet could be even worse than death. Romeo falls to the floor and starts to weep until the nurse arrives and bangs on the door, only to get in and tell Romeo that Juliet has been crying and crying, calling out Thibault's name and then Romeo's, and then falling back down to cry some more. Romeo takes this in the worst possible way and pulls out a dagger, getting ready to kill himself. But this disappoints the friar completely. Hold, hold thy desperate hand, art thou man? Thy form cries out thou art, thy tears are womanish, they will act, denotes the unreasonable fury of a beast. The friar consoles Romeo for a while and tries to show him that there are many things to be appreciated about, and that the way Romeo is acting right now is completely unacceptable. Friar Lawrence has a plan. He tells Romeo that he should climb back to Julie's room and be with her for a night, as long as Romeo can make sure that he leaves early in the morning. Then his plan is to have Romeo escape to the city of Mantua, where he can wait until the news about Romeo and Juliet's marriage becomes public. At this point, Friar Lawrence aims to ask for a pardon from the prince, and then everything could probably work out just fine. The sound of this impresses the nurse, but what lifts Romeo's spirit is something completely different. When the nurse hands Romeo the ring that Juliet had given her right before she exits, Romeo says, "How well my comfort is revived by this!" The scenes come to an end with Romeo saying his farewell to Friar Lawrence and making his way towards his wife.
Capulet apologized to Paris for not taking enough time to help out with Paris' interest in Juliet. Although Lady Capulet says that she will be able to know by the next morning what her daughter's intentions are as in the path to the possible marriage with Paris. Keeper get a bit impatient and goes beyond Lady Capulet's promise. First, he says that he thinks that his daughters will listen to him. Then, the further strap his position by saying that Juliet, in fact, will be get married to Paris on Wednesday. Immediately thereafter, he changed the date on Thursday, since he thinks that Wednesdays will be like a bit too early. If you think back to the party that Capulet held in Act 1 and Scene 2, you might remember that Capulet was once merely in a favor to marriage, but had given some level of decision-making power to his daughter by telling Paris that he should first win Juliet's heart. But as you can see now, Capulet for some reasons felt more pressure to make certain that his daughters get married quickly. And so the Capulet says their farewell to Paris with promise to marriage made to him, not knowing that their daughter is actually already married to Romeo.
After already spending the night together with Juliet in her room, Romeo, following the plans as originally set by Friar Lawrence, gets ready to leave. Juliet wishes that Romeo could stay just a bit longer. She said that the birds that were singing were nightingale birds, which are night birds, and not the lark, which are morning birds. Romeo tries to be responsible and leave, but when Juliet convincing him one more time that the light from the sky is the mentor and not from the sun that is rising, Romeo is overtaken by love and says that he would be willing to die and would rather just spend his time with Juliet right now. But the thought of Romeo actually staying makes Juliet come to her senses. She tells him that he really should leave. At this point, The nurse walks in and warns Juliet that Lady Capulet is coming to Juliet's bedroom. Romeo is left without any option but to leave immediately. They kiss one last time, and he goes down the rope ladder and leaves. Lady Capulet enters Juliet's room. As Lady Capulet says bad things about Romeo, Juliet managed to say things that to the ear of the mother might sound like she is somewhat agreeing with the negative placed upon Romeo, but also has a completely different meaning altogether when seen from her own point of view. Every one of her lines could be understood in two completely different ways, which goes to show that she is a rather intelligent person. Lady Capulet then goes on to mention that there's great news waiting for Juliet. She is to be married soon to Paris. But right at the moment, Juliet said that she does not want to marry Paris, and that if she does want to marry someone, it will be Romeo. At this point, Capulet enters, realizing that his daughter will not comply with his decision to have her married to Paris. Both Capulet and Lady Capulet start to get really nasty to her own daughter. Capulet calls her a green thickness and proceeds to say, "Out with you, baggage, you toll of faith." After also threatening to disown his daughter, he storms out of the room. And when Julian turns to her mother for some form of pity and support, her mother says to her, "Talk not to me, for I'll not speak a word." And she leaves the room as well. Feeling powerless, Juliet asks the nurse for some advice, but the advice the nurse gives rather disappoints Juliet. The nurse tells her that she would be better marrying Paris now, since a life with him would be much better than a life with Romeo. Although Juliet is disappointed, she pretends to agree with the nurse's idea of marrying Paris, and said that she will have to see Fry Lawrence to make a confession for upsetting her father tonight. When the nurse leaves, the scene ends with Juliet realizing that she should never again ask for the nurse's advice.
On Thursday, sir, the time is too short. My father Capulet would have it so. You say you don't know the lady's mind, and even it's the course, I like it not. Fry Lawrence is put into a very difficult situation, since he was the one to approve the marriage of Romeo and Juliet. But since Paris does not know anything about Romeo and Juliet's marriage, he has come to Fry Lawrence in order to make plans for his marriage. At this moment, Juliet arrives, and Paris says many things to Juliet that assume she will end up becoming his wife, and she, once again, responds with perfect ambiguity that makes Paris believe that the marriage is going through, while we, the readers, know that the words have a different meaning altogether. Since she has come to speak with Friar Lawrence alone, Paris leaves, and Juliet is finally able to speak with Friar Lawrence freely. She looks to him for advice, and he indeed has an idea that might solve the situation. However, the idea is one that will require a great amount of courage. Juliet says that she will be willing to do just anything at this moment, whether it will be jumping off a tower, walking down dangerous crime-filled street, or even sitting in the field full of poisonous snakes. Friar Lawrence gives her a potion and tells her to take this potion while she is in bed. The poison will fake her death by slowing down her heartbeat until it stops, and eventually makes her body become cold. Since then she will be put into a coffin, Friar Lawrence wants to send a word to Romeo about this idea, so he can wait for her to wake up and then run away with her to the city of Mantua. Friar Lawrence says that he'll send another friar to the Mantua to deliver the letter to Romeo and his grand plan. With all the details set in stone and with the potion in Juliet's hands, the two part their ways.
Back in the house of the Capulets, the parents are working hard with their servants to prepare for the wedding. When Juliet returns, Capulet and his wife, Lady Capulet, are surprised by their daughter's change of heart. Where I have learned me to repeat the scene of disobedient opposition to you and your behests, and am enjoyed by holy Lawrence to fall prostrate here, to beg your pardon. Pardon, I beseech you, henceforward am ever ruled by you. Send for the country, go tell him of this, I have this knotted up tomorrow morning. Capulet is so happy with Juliet's apologies and her willingness to marry Paris, so much that he decides to move the marriage a day earlier from Thursday to Wednesday instead. Since the wedding is now set up for tomorrow morning, Juliet goes to her room to try on some outfits with the nurse, and Capulet exists to tell Paris about this great news.
Julia tells the nurse and her mother that she is not in need of any help, and so the two of them exit. Now Juliet has a moment to herself. Many different thoughts race through her mind. What if this mixture do not work at all? What if it be a potion which the friar softly had ministered to have me dead? How if, when I am laid into the tomb, I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? As she worries about all the bad things that can happen, she sees the ghost of Tybalt looking for Romeo. She is determined to drink the potion to the thoughts of Romeo, her lover, so she musters up the courage and follows through with her plans.
The next morning, while the final preparations are being made and the musicians are playing their music, the nurse is sent to Capulet to retrieve Juliet, only to find that Juliet seems to be dead. As Capulet, Lady Capulet, and the nurse mourn the death of Juliet, Friar Lawrence, Paris, and the musicians enter the scene. As Paris and Capulet continue to mourn the shocking death of Juliet, Friar Lawrence tells them to be quiet and less negative, since the heavens will take care of her now. Capulet says that all preparations that were made for the wedding should now be used for the funeral instead. Everyone leaves, and as the musicians start to back up, Peter, the Capulet servant, asks for them to play the happy song to ease up the environment. When they feel that such a song will be inappropriate, Peter starts to insult the musicians. Eventually, the musicians decide that they should leave and come back at the dinner time, so that they may be able to catch a free meal at the house of the Capulets.
Somewhere in the streets of Mantua, Romeo thinks to himself about how he just had an amazing dream where he was dead and Juliet kissed him back to life. But his romantic daydream is interrupted by a message from Balthasar, Romeo's servant. Balthasar breaks the news to Romeo that Juliet has passed away. Absolutely shocked, Romeo responds by defying the stars themselves. He tells Balthasar to prepare him a pen and paper and also some horses. Before Balthasar leaves, he asks if were any letters sent from Friar Lawrence. Balthasar tells him that he hasn't received any letters. Balthasar leaves, and Romeo starts to talk to an apothecary, which is a draw maker. He asks for a potion strong enough to kill a person, and although the apothecary is reluctant to sell him the potion, at first Romeo convinces the apothecary that he's so poor that he should just sell the potion for a good price. Once Romeo receives the potion, he is now able to follow through with his plan to die alongside his love, Juliet. Come, cordial and not poison. Go with me, Juliet's grave, for there must I use thee.
Friar Lawrence asked Friar John how the delivery of his letter was received by Romeo. But to his shock, Friar John tells him that he was not able to send the letter to Romeo in the first place. He explains that he was quarantined because of an illness that was breaking out in the city and thus he could not even make it to Mantua. At this point, we find out that Friar Lawrence had never told Friar John about the importance of this letter. So the failure to deliver this letter must not have been seen as a big deal for Friar John. Unhappy fortune by my brotherhood, the letter was not nice, but full of charge of dear import, and neglecting it may do much danger. Friar Lawrence tells Friar John to find a crowbar and bring it to him. He wants to get to the tomb himself and get Juliet out to safety. He decides to write to Mantua again and notify Romeo that his new plan is to have Juliet wait in his cell until Romeo arrives.
Paris visited the tomb of Juliet and ordered his page, which is a servant, to give him some flowers, and asked him watch to see if someone is coming. He specifically instructs his page to whistle if someone approaches, and with Paris start to scatter the petals of the flowers all around Juliet. Knowing that someone is approaching, Paris decides to hide to see who is it, and from the dark emerge Romeo and his servant Balthazar. Romeo tells Balthazar to give him his jewel and makes up an excuse as to why he is digging up Juliet. He tells Balthazar that he is just trying to retrieve an important ring from the body of Juliet. He instructs Balthazar to leave and not to spy him in any way, and also give him a letter that he has written to his father. He says farewell and gives him some money, saying, "Live and be prosperous, and farewell, good fellow." Balthazar pretends to leave but actually stays behind and hides to see what Romeo is up to. Unfortunately, his intentions mean very little in the end, since Balthazar ends up falling asleep recognizing Romeo as the man that has been exiled and the man that killed Tybalt. Paris assumed that this Montague must have come to disrespect Juliet, so he comes out and engage a fight without provoke me, then have a tree boy after witnessing the fight break out between Paris and Romeo. Paris' page runs off to get help, but no longer after Romeo becomes the ultimate victor in the fight between the two. "Oh, I am sly. I thought be merciful, open the tomb, and lie me with Juliet." When Romeo sees Juliet, he wonders to himself, how is it possible that Juliet could be so beautiful, even as a dead person? He gives her a kiss and drinks the poison that he had bought earlier on. The poison works its effects quickly, and Romeo gives her one last kiss before he eventually dies. Arriving just seconds too late, Friar Lawrence sees Balthazar and enters into the tomb only to see that Romeo and Paris are both dead. At this point, Julie wakes up and sees that Romeo and Paris are dead right beside her. As if this were not intense enough of a moment, sound of a man approaching the tomb can be heard. It is evident that the friar that people will soon arrive to this end, and so he decides to run away. Juliet, however, does not follow him. She finds a cup and realizes that Romeo must have poisoned himself. After seeing that he was dead in an attempt to kill herself, she kisses his lip. But with the sound of a man drawing closer and closer, she realizes that she has no time to hope for this poison to work. She looks to Romeo's dagger and without much contemplation, she kills herself right then and there. By the time Paris' page and the watchman arrive, all are already dead. Eventually, the prince and the Capulets arrive and are obviously shocked to see that Juliet, who is supposed to be dead, already seems to have somehow died again. But the tragic set of events continue further when Montague arrives and explains that his wife has recently passed away from sadness. In regards to Romeo being exiled for Montague to have to witness the death of his son right after seeing his wife pass away is a most catastrophic moment. When the prince asks to Friar Lawrence to speak of what he knows in regards to this event, Friar Lawrence gives a clear explanation as to what had already happened between Romeo and Juliet. The prince confirmed everything that has been said by the friar as true remarks after reading Romeo's letter that Balthasar was supposed to send to Montague. Capulet, Montague, see what discourse is laying upon your head that heaven finds mean to kill your joys with love, and I for winking at your discourse have lost the brace of kidmen, all are punished. But unlike the beginning of this story, Montague and Capulet agree with the prince's disappointment. They decide to finally let go of their hate that they have felt for each other for such a long time. In fact, Montague even proclaims that he will raise a statue of Capulet's daughter Juliet in Gaul. Capulet remarks that he shall also make a statue of Romeo in Gaul right beside his daughter. The prince says that there will never be a story more painful than this one, and so ends the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet.